Welcome FPL managers to a new video from Fantasy Football Scout. My name is Ted and we're talking pre-season at the moment, especially mid-price forwards. I'm joined by my guest, Rob from FPL Hall. How are you doing, mate?
I'm good, mate. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Excited?
I'm very excited for the new season. Pre-season is just gone on forever because the FPL game was launched so early. So it has tailed off a bit in excitement for it, but I think 4 weeks to go. My excitement's back. Lots of content to get through. I'm sweating. It's really hot in England. So yeah, let's just get on with it. I think what we'll start with is have a look at these three players. I've got Bamford, Watkins, and Calvert-Lewin up on the screen. We're not going to go through them in detail, but these are the most popular picks from the Premier League last season. It's Tony currently at 35% ownership, which is astounding. But we'll focus on these three players to start. And none of these three players are in our four picks, actually, are they? Which is surprising. Bamford, his fixtures are pretty. They're tough to start off with, I think, aren't they? Man United, Everton, Burnley, Liverpool. I'm a bit sceptical about whether he's going to replicate what he did last season. What do you think, Rob?
Well, I said to you before that when I was making my notes and research for the video, I honestly overlooked Bamford because of the stats I've been looking at and remembering. So for me personally, I'll look at the last 10 game weeks and looking at Bamford, his overall season was fantastic. People are forgetting, I think, his previous season. So I don't want to throw around that term one season wonder because it's come back to bite people who said that about, Harry Kane. But we're talking about a player that historically has not been great overall, but he's ending to the season just briefly. 14th for goal attempts, 11th for shots in the box, 6th for goals, 17th for penalty area touches, and 7th for big chances. Really doesn't scream, season starter to me, especially with the fixture.
That was the last 10 game weeks of the season, was it?
Last 10 game weeks, yeah. Which is, so I was actually going to ask you as a man of the stats that personally, when we look at a whole season, so when a new season starts, we're clawing and begging for more data. So when it gets to game week 2 or game week 3, we're saying that there's not enough data. Can we make those decisions, those transfers, those team selections, those captaincy choices on the data we have? But now, pre-season, you've got 38 game weeks. And I personally don't look at 38 game weeks because it feels far too much. So personally, I look at the last 10 game weeks of the season. I think as well, when we look at the players that we'll talk about later and the way their team styles have changed as well, looking at how a team played way at the start of the season compared to the second half of the season, formations change, styles change, formations change. I think looking at the end of the season is far more valuable than looking at the beginning of the season.
I completely agree with you. I think during the season, my two ways of looking at stats, you need to balance long-term trends with short-term form. And that's what you need to do. Bamford, bringing it back to Bamford, his long-term tendencies are he misses big chances and he loves to score small chances, which just screams to me that's not sustainable long-term. But if he's in form, you just got to have him in your team, as in everyone did last season. But
true. But when you're saying about the big chances and small chances, you've got players like Son who smashed that, right? So,
absolutely.
But I think when we're talking about quality, I think there's a little bit of a difference between Bamford and Heung-min Son. But
absolutely, completely agree with that. It's totally down to playability. I think Bamford is a good player. I just don't think he's the best, maybe compared to like the likes of Rafinha in that Leeds team.
Not for fixtures and price, certainly not.
Yeah, 8 million, a bit overpriced for me. And with that start to the season, I think I'll probably ignore Bamford, even though I think he's fourth most owned in the game. So let's move on to the next player, Watkins. Aston Villa start the season with 3 really, really appetising fixtures in, who was it? Watford away, Newcastle at home, Brentford at home. Really, really key fixtures. The trouble is for me is that they then have a really tough run. And if you bring in Watkins, you're probably going to be transferring out for the likes of maybe Jimenez. Wolves have a really good run from game week 4. But you're setting up a transfer, and I just hate that. It just goes against all of my principles. So much bad stuff can happen in FPL. You don't want to plan ahead too much because it more often than not, the landscape changes so quickly. So Grealish is another factor, isn't he? Whether he stays at Aston Villa or not. And Buendia is going to be a good addition to that Villa squad. But if they can keep Grealish and Buendia, then maybe Watkins' appeal does go up a little bit. So it's a wait and see for me. What do you think about Watkins?
Watkins, price-wise, stat-wise, he's honestly high up on my list of forward rankings to start the season with. So you make a great point that the first 3 fixtures for Villa are fantastic. I would, at the moment in my side, I've got Buendia and Grealish, but that could change based on like Sancho's price, which will affect my like a Cavani decision, for example. But with Watkins, for that price, and I understand the 3 fixtures are fantastic, and after that it's a difficult run. But for me, I just want to start the season solid. So I'm not going to not go for Watkins just because game week 4 onwards isn't easy, because I'm going to have 3 weeks to make changes if I need to. So say it gets to game week 4, I don't really like throwing the terms out there, but like fixture proof. I think Grealish is a player who we would quote as fixture proof, right? If he's still at Villa, because he could be at Man City or anywhere else in the world. Watkins, though, I just would start the season with him. 3, you've said it yourself, 3 solid fixtures. And again, stat-wise, in the last 10 game weeks are fantastic. First for penalty area touches, second for assists, second for final third touches. You know, he's got the right stats in the right places. And to start the season, because that's what we're doing, right? We're not planning for game week 4, 5 and onwards. A lot of people like myself will often use an early wild card. Maybe not as early as game week 4 this season. Last season, do you remember we all started with Aubameyang because there was no United, no City. I didn't have Mo Salah, I didn't have Bruno or anything like that. It was horrific. I had double Liverpool defense. But just, yeah, I would definitely start the season with Watkins.
The landscape changes so quickly during an FPL season. We always look back at our game week 1 teams and go, what on earth was I thinking? Why did I start with Sam Maximan and Callum Wilson and all that?
I started with Timo Werner and Kai Havertz and double Liverpool defence. So,
I mean, Kai Havertz isn't a bad shout this year, but yeah, we're not getting to midfielders this chat. But yeah, Watkins for me is an interesting one. I'm really debating whether having him or not. And as you say, it's a really good point. We more often than not wildcard pretty early on. I'm not sure I've had a season where I've kept the wildcard past game week 6 or something, which is crazy, which is just goes to show how wrong you tend to get it pre-season. So yeah,
but
I mean,
also you look at Villa's fixtures as well. So I understand that the first 3 are great. When I look at the list, and Chelsea away obviously is extremely difficult, but I don't think Everton is that difficult. We're gonna have to wait to see how Rafa shapes up defensively. United don't always keep clean sheets. Spurs, then Wolves. Yeah, I just think he's not too bad.
Well, it was a good segue thinking about Rafa. Dominique Calvert-Lewin is our 3rd man on this initial graphic. And I mean, it's going to take a brave person to go without Calvert-Lewin. His stats were really good last season. 22 returns in 33 appearances. He was top amongst forwards for big chances per appearance. And that sort of player he is. He likes to be fed from the wide positions, and if Everton have a fully fit side, he could be really lethal, as he was at the start of last season. Everton, they did struggle for injuries, but it's not this man that you are interested in, which is really interesting to me. So let's move on to see your first pick, and it is the Brazilian Richarlison.
Yeah, it kills me because Dominic Calvert-Lewin saved the start of my season. He genuinely did. I didn't have any of the big hitters at all for the first 8 to 10 game weeks. It was horrific. And I started the season with Dominic Calvert-Lewin. So, of course, I'm tempted to start with him. And I said earlier as well that I'm genuinely looking to possibly start the season with both Everton strikers. I think both of them are viable, but I said earlier about looking at the last 10 game weeks, not the entire season. So it is really a tale of 2 seasons for Calvert-Lewin last season. So in game weeks 1 to 19, 16 appearances, 11 goals, 4 assists, which is fantastic. But from game week 20 to 38, 17 appearances, 5 goals, 2 assists. So in the second half of the season, I know you said about injuries that happened to Everton, but when I come on to it a little bit later, just about the style of football that Everton played changed as well. That might be a moot point because they've changed the manager, but I will get on to Rafa as well. So he's halved in the second half of the season. But when you look at Richarlison, he's massively improved with that change of play for Everton. So 13 appearances, 2 goals and 3 assists for the first half. Second half of the season, 21 appearances, 5 goals and 1 assist. So his goal output is a lot higher in the second half of the season. And that is down to that style of play. I still think Dominique Calvert-Lewin is an incredible pick. And he is genuinely a player that I'm still going to look at and possibly start with both Everton lads as the strikers. He's a proven goal scorer, 16 goals in a season, nicely priced at 8 million. And I genuinely think the England call-up would give him a huge boost. I said earlier about Bamford, people putting him down. I think Calvert-Lewin's had that quite a lot. People maybe doubting the level of his ability, but I don't think there's many people out there that would question his involvement as an England squad player. So I think that sort of boost will help him as well.
I think I completely agree. I think he did struggle with the notoriety maybe before last season, but really, really good last season. That's put him firmly up on the news lines. And I just go back to your point. You're thinking about going with DCL and Richarlison to start the season,
and Luca Dean.
And Luca Dean. They're just okay for someone who tripled up on Everton during their second half of the season and completely regretted it. I think it ruined my entire season. I just I wouldn't recommend it personally, but you clearly have faith in Rafa Benitez and what he's going to do.
Yeah. Well, I also part of my belief and what I would suggest other people to do is to not take those last season feel. You know, you have people like Raheem Sterling. I'm not bringing him back in because, you know, he's done this for Man City and he's cost me points, but then he goes and smashes it with England, right? And I completely agree. I've tripled up on Everton myself. I know that pain, but I'm not going to take last season's results into this season's pick. So, for example, you said yourself, Havertz this season is a fantastic pick, but he was a terrible pick last season. But going on to Rafa Benitez, so how Everton changed their style is, at first, they had Dominique Calvert-Lewin as like an Inzaghi light. It's like Ancelotti said, I only want you to touch the ball a maximum of 2 times, right? So I want you to control it and kick it in the net, or just kick it straight in the net, 1 touch. As the season progressed, it became more like a hitting the target man. Right, so he would hold the ball up, play it to the side, or flick it onto Richarlison, which is why Richarlison's numbers increased. But Rafa Benitez, going back to his time at Newcastle, now, of course, Everton's squad now compared to 2018, 2019, Newcastle squad is vastly different, but his play style of playing a 4-5-1, and this is why Luca Dean is genuinely in my side, because he really utilizes wing backs. Now, Calvert-Lewin aerially, in the last 10 weeks, was the strongest FPL forward for heading attacks. So granted, that could carry on again. He's had success, Benitez, at Newcastle with Rondon, who got 11 goals as that centre forward target man player. But his main job is to be the outlet for the defense, who smash it up to the forward and they hold it up and play it to the wingers like Richarlison, or play it to the wing backs to whip it back in. So a problem that we might find with Dominic Calvert-Lewin this season is you want him in the box to head in a corner or a cross from Luca Dean, right? But I do feel at times that we're going to find Calvert-Lewin being in that dropped position of, I don't want to say false 9, not that deep, but that kind of role. So that's what he's played before.
That's a super good point. I remember at times when Ancelotti played around with the formation last season that Dominic Calvert-Lewin did start coming short, and that is when Richarlison started getting his goals, running in behind from a flick-on header or something like that. So it is a really good point, and it'll be really interesting to keep an eye on with what Benitez does choose. I've got a graphic up on screen for Richarlison. Everton's fixtures do seem to be really good. Southampton, Leeds, Brighton, Burnley, Villa. Really good start to the season. But certainly, if you look over the course of the season, as you've alluded to, his attacking returns, his XGI, his big attempts, which is shots and chances created, small attempts, which is the small version of that, all not great compared to the other attackers. But he's always had that talent, and I really wish... Well, I think it would be a really good pick if he starts exploding for Benitez. One thing I would say is it pure conjecture at the moment, but isn't he being linked to a move to Real Madrid or something with Ancelotti?
And remember, Ancelotti said he gave him a 30-goal target for the season, so he's got that belief that he can be that good. And we have seen glimpses of him being that good. But going back to what you said about on the screen with the graphic, that's his full season stats. But the last 10 game weeks, he's 4th for goal attempts. He's 2nd for attempts inside the box. He's 5th for headed attempts, 4th for penalty area touches, and 5th for final third touches.
So he ended the season really strongly, and that's super encouraging. So he's going off to the Olympics, I think. We'll see. Yeah. We'll be able to keep an eye on him, see if he's in form. And although pre-season form, take it with a pinch of salt, I always think. But I really like this.
And also, just finally about Everton, when you said about the fixtures, it's in the first 10 games, they only play one of the traditional big six as well. So if there's going to be a team back for that first wild card.
Yeah, if you're going to gamble on Richarlison, you may as well do it now. Yeah, exactly. No, I really like that pick. There's a lot of people saying, ignore Richarlison. You've gone against the grain, and I really respect that. So I want to keep an eye on this for you. I think it'll be an interesting one. But let's move on to my first pick. And this is Mikel Antonio from West Ham. And I think he's in the top 7 most owned forwards. So he's clearly at 11.3% owned. He's being picked, but he's not the most owned by any stretch of the imagination. West Ham have a decent start to the season. Newcastle, Leicester's a bit tricky. Palace, Southampton are accessible, and then Man United. So decent start. Not as maybe good as the likes of Everton or Leicester, but still worth picking him, I think. I mean, his stats are pretty good on a per appearance basis. I think he only played 26 appearances out of the 38. So he did miss a period of the season. But 0.57 for attacking returns per appearance. To put that into perspective, Brentford was top of that stat for 0.74 per appearance. 0.59 XGI per appearance. He's actually top of that, first in the whole forwards, 6 to 9 million, top for XGI, and that's really encouraging. Big attempts, which are the really clear-cut opportunities, 0.81 per appearance. He wasn't too far away from DCL, who is top of that list at 0.97, so he's actually not too far away at 0.81. And 4th for small attempts with 2.65. Watkins is top of that at 2.97. Antonio, for me, I don't think it depends on whether Lingard goes to West Ham, because there's a lot of people that say, oh, is Antonio only good with Lingard? I think he was just as good when there was a period without Lingard and when he was with Lingard. So I think Lingard is waiting currently to see what his future is at Man United. But there's so much attacking talent at Man United now, especially with Jadon Sancho joining the ranks. I can't personally see Lingard staying at Man United. So probably David Moyes will get his wish. And I think that probably is a good thing for Antonio. It just makes the side more dynamic. Yes, Lingard might get more share of the goals, maybe taking it away from Antonio, and maybe threaten his penalty taking. I don't think actually Antonio's on penalties. It's Declan Rice, isn't it? So that's a downside for Antonio. But I think he's just generally a really good player. And if he can play 38 times out of 38 games, then which is the bigger
games can come true.
But maybe to start the season off, I really do favour Antonio. What are your thoughts on him?
Actually, I'm going to play devil's advocate because the key phrase that for you and Antonio is per appearance. Per appearance. Now, I know Danny Ings smashed that tag over his head of being injury prone, and then he had that fantastic season. But Antonio and those hamstrings are a major danger. And per appearance, he is fantastic, and you watch him and he's explosive for the first 65 minutes, and then he starts to lag a little bit. So for me, fitness and hamstrings are a little bit iffy. And you actually made a point that I thought about earlier. You said about bringing Lingard in. I think with or without Lingard, Antonio can be a great player when he's fully fit. But for me, the key is I would be massively surprised if West Ham don't go out there and get a striker. Because they sold Hallier, was it back in January, right? In the winter transfer window. They have no backup strikers. You had like Bowen playing as striker. They've got no centre forwards. They're in Europe this season. So that's more games. And haven't they just brought back replays for the FA Cup and 2 legs for the semi-final? So if you've got West Ham that have got FA Cup replays and they get far in the Carabao Cup and they do well in Europe, you're thinking about Antonio trying to get 38 games in a Premier League season, but how are they going to do when they get deep into Europe?
It's a really good point. It's a really good point. And you've made.
And if they're going to get a striker, they're not going to go out there and get like a king who, a backup that Everton got, who's now at Watford. West Ham have got to go out there and get if they want to take the next step, they've got to go out there and get a marquee centre forward striker. And I'm really surprised that I've not really heard any rumours coming out.
It's interesting. I think it was an interesting move that Haller left and they left Antonio, especially with his recent injury record. But since then, I mean, they clearly have faith in him to stay fit because slowly it's ebbed away, that concern about his hamstrings. I do understand what you're saying. If this is a long-term thing, it could come back at any time, as can any injury. But yeah, I think it's very interesting that they haven't, they probably have searched the transfer market for maybe a forward and haven't found someone suitable, and maybe have to rely on the likes of people like Yarmolenko and Fornals doing the job. But yeah, I like Antonio maybe for the start of the season, and I'm not going to keep him for 38 games because our team changes like every week, doesn't it? So we will see. I think he's a good option, and
I think he's explosive.
Yes, he can be.
Like when they've got the fixtures and he's on it, he really is on it. But just finally, what I'll say is his season totals have been 118 points, 111 points, and 118 points in the last 3 seasons. So for me, Antonio is a player to bring in when you've seen him and he's hot.
Yeah.
Start of the season could be cold. We don't know about preseason, how much weight we put on preseason performances. For me, Antonio's a deep season pick. When the fixtures are there, they've got a run of 3 good fixtures. He's looking fit and healthy and strong. I think that's when I personally bring Antonio into my team.
Completely agree. And I think those season totals are just mainly because he hasn't had the number of games. Last season he scored 10 goals, but that was mainly towards the back end of the season. And the previous season before that, that's what I meant. Previous season before that, he scored 10 goals towards the back end of the season. The most recent season, he scored 10 goals again. But he played more consistently throughout. So, yeah, I do agree. It's a little bit of an ask to expect him to play and stay fit for 38 games. But maybe the short term at the start of the season, I'm probably going to go with him. So, yeah. Let's move on to your second pick, who I really like. Notice that I'm being really positive about your picks.
I know. I need the other side of the argument. That's what it talked me out of this one. You need to talk me out of this one. I think I've already talked myself out of this one, but okay.
I actually really like this pick. And this is Edison Cavani from Man United to talk us through it.
So yeah, Cavani, I said. We actually both had said Antonio to each other before. We had very similar picks for our budget strikers. And actually, I think I'm going to start in a 3-5-2 or a 4-4-2 with 2 budget strikers. I don't think I'm going to go all the way up to Harry Kane unless he goes to Man City, and that might, throw a spanner in the works. But why Cavani? 8 million start price, so he's in that budget territory. Now, you can do the negatives, or I can do the negatives for Cavani. That's perfectly fine.
I'm going to be
13
positive.
starts. Oh, you be positive. I'll be negative. Good cop, bad cop. Perfect. 13 starts, 26 appearances. So alarm bells are ringing straight away to say rotation. I completely understand. 10 goals, 3 assists, it feels like a lot of these budget strikers seem to get around that 10 goal mark for that value. But, first, he's 34 years, going on to 35. It feels like when you get strikers, you're on that wrong side of 30, right? But, Vardy smashed that for years. But also, it's another story of 2 seasons. So the first 19 games, remember, he signed, I think, October. He was late. So it took time to get in. Only 4 starts in 12 appearances for the first 19 game weeks, 4 goals, 2 assists. The last second half of the season, 9 starts, 14 appearances, 6 goals and 1 assist. So yes, there is that risk of rotation. I completely understand that. But actually, for me, he's definitely that kind of player that even if he's on the bench and United need a goal, they'll throw him on. And he's genuinely it feels just as dangerous from the bench as when he starts. So first, he's a proven clinical striker. Now, I don't really like looking back too much because last season's stats and goals don't necessarily mean this season is going to be the same. But he's got history. So last year he got 16 goals in 38 appearances in all competitions, which is a very solid out. And if that's 38 league games, 16 goals is Dominique Calvert-Lewin territory, right? But 18 of those appearances of 38 came from the bench. So out of 38, 20 started, 18 from the bench, and he still gets 16 goals. He averages a goal every 108.7 minutes, and he's Mr. Consistent. In the last 12 seasons, he's reached double digits for goals. And he's also had 5 seasons where he's got over 20 goals, and he's had 1 season where he got over 30 goals. So he's just consistent. And then second of all, looking at going about rotation and worried about him not playing, let's look at his teammate rivals. So Rashford, potentially out for the first couple of months, I think, with a shoulder injury. He wants surgery is it his shoulder? I'm pretty sure it's his.
I don't know, actually. But, I mean, he normally plays on the left, doesn't he? So it's normally Martial or Cavani.
Yeah, and that's where I'm just thinking, because that front three, they're quite versatile. They can sort of play in any position. So Cavani is the only out-and-out number 9 striker as your front man. So Martial has played there, but traditionally he is that winger forward, right? So you've got Rashford, who's potentially out, Martial, who's out of form and a bit of favour, but could start the season on the wing. Sancho's going to be on the other wing, and then Greenwood as well can play down the middle. But I do feel as though that the Man United starting lineup would be Cavani down the middle, Sancho on one side, and potentially Martial or Greenwood on the other. So if you're worried about him not starting, and they kind of begged him to stay. He was looking to leave and go back or go to another club or closer to home. So they must have promised him game time for him to stick around.
Yeah.
I just don't feel as though he would stick around if, they didn't sort of sell him some minutes or just pay more money.
It's super interesting. The whole thing about, he only had, 13 starts last season, but 26 appearances. So he started as many times as he was a sub. So I just wonder whether that's something to do with his fitness or whether he needs to get it back up again, or it's maybe to do with his age or something like that. But regardless, as you say, he's a proven goal scorer. And for me, he's a very similar ilk to Calvert-Lewin. He needs to have those deliveries come into him. And if he's surrounded by Sancho, Luke Shaw, who's, Mr. Provider in Man United nowadays, I just think that if they sort of connect, he could really have a massive season if he starts and plays, Aguero-esque 60 to 70 minutes every game. That would be great.
Enough for a Man United centre forward.
Yeah,
I think is enough. But also going back to about how many starts he had. Remember, like I said, the start of the season he came in October and he needed time to catch up. So he didn't have a full preseason, and he wasn't exactly ready to go at the start of the season.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I am tempted by Cavani. Man United's fixtures are fantastic, and I know a lot of people are going maybe Sancho when he gets announced, or Fernandes, Luke Shaw, all these popular picks, and that's because of the fixtures. Leeds, Southampton, Wolves, Newcastle, West Ham, a really good start to the season, and maybe a gamble on Cavani could... It's problem. It's a wait and see, because you want to see the Man United lineup. You want to see how they consistently line up ahead of each match, and maybe the first couple of games would show you that. So maybe he's a transfer down the line, maybe not someone to start the season with. But his stats per appearance were fairly decent for someone who played fairly intermittently. So yeah, I do like that pick. But let's move on to my last one, and then we'll have a roundup of the other remaining options. I've gone with Mr. Iheanacho, Leicester, and I think, again, he's in the top 7 picked after the likes that we've already talked about, other than Tony. So he's clearly getting picked. 16.6% ownership currently, 7.5 million. Seems to be such a huge amount of players on 7.5 million. So Leicester start the season with a pretty good run of fixtures. Wolves, West Ham, Norwich, definitely one to target. Man City, much harder, and then Brighton in their first 5. So it's a little bit of a mix, but the Wolves, Norwich, Brighton, definitely accessible. Wolves in particular, we don't know how Bruno Lage is going to set up with Wolves. He did a 4-4-2 in the pre-season against Crewe Alexander, but I think he's going to be a more of attacking intent than maybe a defensive, which is slightly different to what we're used to seeing at Wolves. So maybe Leicester can get at them. But the thing about Iheanacho is his stats, even though he had, 25 appearances, 16 starts, so he was used as a bit of a sub as well. 25 appearances, didn't play the full season, but on a per appearance basis, he's very, very consistent. 6th for attacking returns, 8th for XGI, 6th for big attempts, 6th for small attempts. So he's pretty high on all of those metrics, a pretty good all-rounder. They've got this new guy come in from RB Salzburg, Daka, who seems to be pretty exciting, similar ilk to Mane. But I don't think he's going to be coming in immediately and taking either Vardy or Iheanacho's spot. I think he's a long-term replacement for Vardy. So I don't think he's got too much to worry. And he's had a couple of weeks off on holiday, back at pre-season training, fresh and ready to go. Definitely tempted by Iheanacho. What do you think?
I'm gonna look such a bad guy, Ted, when I'm like, but honestly, his stats are incredible. So going to my last 10 game week range, he's first for goals with 9 in the last 10 game weeks, first for final third touches, first for take-ons and most successful take-ons, second for goal attempts, 5th for shots in the box, 4th for big chances, 1st for shots on target. Like, his stats are absolutely incredible. Going back to Daka, though, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I've watched the Austrian Bundesliga, because I haven't, but his stats are absolutely insane. He's got 27 goals and 7 assists in 28 appearances. Now, of course, when we talk about the championship promoted strikers later, there is a huge difference between the Premier League and the Austrian Bundesliga. I'm not trying to put that division down, but that is still a really impressive stat. But just going back to Iheanacho, fantastic stats. He kind of felt like he was a forgotten man, because when he burst onto the scene at Man City, he looked incredible. And for me, it was a huge surprise when they sold him, because it felt like he was going to be Aguero's next, his protege, the one he was going to nurture to be the next Aguero. It didn't quite pan out, but the second half of last season, he was absolutely incredible. But a key thing that we have noticed is the absence of Harvey Barnes from that side. And now what I tend to do is, of course, I watch a lot of content and listen to a lot of content, but when I'm looking specifically at teams, I'll try and find sort of a dedicated fan with a bit of a reputation for being someone who follows their team. They can tell you the name of, the tea lady and the kit man, and, what time the groundsman gets into work, that kind of fan account. So Samuel Martin FPL, without the A, is the one I follow for Leicester on Twitter. And he pointed out that without Barnes, in the actual stats like non-pen XG, shots per 90 minutes, and his general goals and FPL points absolutely skyrocketed when Harvey Barnes was injured and not in the side. And they played a 3-4-1-2, which was Vardy being the provider alongside Iheanacho. But however, with Barnes, they usually play a 4-2-3-1 formation. So I agree that Iheanacho is going to be ahead of Daka, but my negative for Iheanacho is he's had a fantastic season last season, but going into this season, we don't know what formation they're going to play. And if they're going to play with one forward, people might think Vardy, it's, he's getting on. He's the wrong side of 30. Like I said about Cavani. Are they going to start with Iheanacho? Or if it's one up front, who are they going to play? So if you don't think Daka's going to be the one, who's going to be the one out of Jamie Vardy and Iheanacho? That's going to be the question that you'll probably have to wait until maybe it's too late. I'm genuinely trying to start the season with a nailed team of players that I know. Far too many times I'll start a season with, Sancho coming in. Last season I had Timo Werner and I had Kai Havertz because I was so excited. New talent. I saw some YouTube highlight clips and they looked absolutely incredible. And I thought, right, I'm getting them in. And I'm starting the season with teams and players that I know they will be the ones that start. And for me, if Barnes doesn't start, then it might still be a 3-4-1-2. Vardy plays alongside Iheanacho, same as last season. But it's the unknown. It's not knowing is what's putting 100%. Me off Iheanacho. Nothing about his stats, nothing about his ability, nothing about, when he's on the pitch, he's an amazing option. Is he going to be on the pitch? That's the
question. I get it. Whether they're going to play two up top or not, I get it. But surely he's shown so much at the end of last season that he's become undroppable, at least maybe for the first 5 games. But I do understand what you're saying. I felt super excited about all these picks, and then you're like a touch of realism, and now I'm like, oh, shall I just go with Calvert-Lewin and Watkins like everyone else?
You could double Everton with me if you want.
Oh God, no, never again. But no, okay. I think Iheanacho is still really good pick. As you say, there is an element of doubt about the formation, and Harvey Barnes coming back could change that. Leicester are a really dynamic side, so fingers crossed they still keep Iheanacho in their starting 11 and score tons of goals. With him as my captain every week. Maybe not. Right, let's move on to the best of the rest, and I've got a bit of an XG graphic here to show everyone, and it's just the teams, all the Premier League teams last season, how many goals they scored, and their expected goals up the left-hand side. And obviously we don't have the promoted teams on here, so it's probably best to start with them. From what I have been educated on by the FPL Wire, which was fantastic, FPL Irons properly educated me on Brentford in particular. Just Brentford seem to be the new Leeds. They could come in and score loads of goals, but I'm a little bit apprehensive about it. I want to see whether they're what everyone is talking about, actually, whether they adapt to the Premier League in the same way Leeds did. Norwich, they seem to be scoring less goals than they did when the last time they were promoted, and Watford seem to be the defensive team. That's my perception. Tony, let's start with Tony, the most owned Premier League forward in the game. What do you think of him? 43 attacking returns in 48 appearances or something?
31 goals, 10 assists in 45 games. Incredible. But when Norwich was up last time and had Pukki, this backfired for the start of my season. But I genuinely don't tend to start Premier League seasons with newly promoted sides. And certainly not with sides that haven't been there and haven't done it. And same for players. So again, what I said about Daka with the Austrian Bundesliga is, it's like 27 goals in 28 games or whatever it was. It's incredible, but that's not the Premier League. Tony doesn't have Premier League experience under his belt. And it feels that the further in time we go, the more seasons progress, the gap between the Premier League and the Football League is just growing year on year. And I just feel as though I can't say too much about Tony because I'm not sat there and watched 45 of his games. But I'm just talking from experience that we rarely have a player that comes up to the Premier League and can do exactly what they did in the Championship. You're usually halving what they did in the Championship. I know Bamford has come up and done bits, but I don't know.
It's unusual though, isn't it? It's unusual.
Really is.
I mean, funnily enough, I'm going to take away my positivity and remain just as sceptical. And
join me.
Yeah, you've brought me down. I'm now. So yeah, no, I I'm not sure I will start with Tony. I think I will probably only start if the squad structure in my team probably demands a 6.5 striker. And then, yes, he's 100% in. But if I can splash the cash on some 7.5s, then I'll probably look somewhere else, certainly at the start of the season, for more tried and tested Premier League options. But there is no doubt that he's done bits, as you said, in the Championship. And I'm not surprised to see him really, really well owned. Everyone loves a bargain, and he certainly looks on paper to be one. But let's see how Brentford adjusts first.
6.5 though. If it was 5.5 million, I think it'd be a lot higher and would ask us more questions. But you said it yourself, 6.5 to a 7.5 million proven Premier League striker like a Watkins or a Carver Lewin. Oh, Carver Lewin's 8, but that sort of territory, I think it's a lot to ask.
It is. Anyone else from the promoted sides grab your attention?
That Pookie party and that wonderful GIF will be going all over Twitter again, I'm sure, when he scores that dancing one.
I just can't see it. I think Norwich are not going to be the same side as they were.
No, 11 goals and 3 assists when he was in the Premier League last time, and then 26 goals and 4 assists last season. So it comes back to sort of at least halving what you did in a Championship to the Premier League. I mean, if Tony halved it, it's still going to be incredible. But I think last season that was incredible with those attacking returns. But the difference with Pookie is 6 million, so he's 0.5 million cheaper, but he has that Premier League experience. You know, he's been there, done that. So in a way, I might be a little bit more tempted to lean towards Pookie over Tony, just because they've been in the Premier League before. But on the fixture ticket for the first 8 games, Norwich are down there. They opened the season at they've got Liverpool, Man City, Leicester, Arsenal in the first 4. So I'm sticking to my rule of no starting promoted players.
I probably agree with you. I mean, I think currently in my team, the only promoted player I have is Sarr from Watford. I think he'll be a good option, but I'm a little bit sceptical about whether they can score as many goals. He seems to be on penalties, though. Not talking about midfielders, though. I'm not sure there are many striker options.
Just João Pedro and Josh King, both 5.5 million, but they did change the middleman Watford a few times. Okay. So it might be João Pedro, could be Success, could be Sarr down the middle. But again, they're even less. They're a lot fewer. 9 goals, 3 assists in 38 games for João Pedro. So definitely Watford's forwards would be probably the last place should be going for your forwards.
Yeah, I think so. I completely agree there. So it seems to me Tony or bust. Well, from my perspective, I think from the promoted sides. We will see, though. Right, let's move on to the best of the rest from the Premier League. And I think there's a few players we've got left to talk about. Let's start with Raul Jimenez from Wolves. And it's really nice to see that he's back from injury. Had a terrible head injury last season. And he was a complete legend the previous 2 seasons. He played a big part in my team the previous season, which got a good rank. But he's back for pre-season. He played 30 minutes against Crewe Alexander, and he's got a new manager in Bruno Lage, who seems to be more attacking. We've got on the chart, Wolves were pretty poor for expected goals last season. Maybe that was because of the lack of Jimenez. So what do we think? Is Jimenez going to set Wolves alight again, coupled with the manager?
I love him. I call him the Mexican marksman. I genuinely would put him. So I support Bolton. So I don't have a Premier League club. So I don't have that sort of bias. If I was going to choose one of my favorite players, it would be Raul Jimenez. Like in baseball, you know, when they can bat, they can field, they can pitch, right? Jimenez is like that for a forward. He can shoot, he can pass, he can head. And unfortunately, coming back to that final point of heading, it's not a player to start the season with. He's been out for so long. It could be physically, he might not be able to be quite as good in the air. It could be mentally. We haven't seen him in that competitive atmosphere of the ball goes up in the air, the goalkeeper goes up, the defender goes up. We don't really know what's going to happen. In terms of his quality, is incredible. But to come back professionally, from such a horrible. It was a head fracture, right?
It was, yeah.
It was awful to see. So to see him back on a football pitch is incredible. But would I start my season with a player who hasn't had Premier League football in months, and we don't know where he's going to be physically with his head specifically, but also mentally with
100%. Although Neil will be, shaking his head at you because he clearly haven't read his scout notes on Crew Alexandra. Wolves
33 minutes.
Jimenez, apparently, according to Neil, he didn't look like he was suffering from any sort of mental strain or psychological. He was going up for balls, headed attempts, hit the post in that game. So, I mean, I didn't see it, I didn't watch it, but it's from those snippets of words, it does sound encouraging. I think what you're saying is, yes, it's not someone to start the season with, particularly as Wolves have really 3 difficult fixtures to start the season in Leicester, Tottenham and Man United. But from then on, they've got one of the best runs of fixtures you'll see. So let's scout Jimenez. Let's have a look in the first 3 games, see if he's back to his best, and go from game week 4. As I said earlier, right at the start, Watkins, really good 3 fixtures, and then Aston Villa's fixtures get really bad, and Wolves gets really good. So it could be a nice little swap from Watkins to Jimenez.
I'll just be bringing in Jimenez for probably Carver Lewin or Richarlison game week 2 or 3. So,
well, I can understand Richarlison, you see, but oh, you crazy man starting with Everton, unbelievable. I think I'm too scarred to do it, but I admire you for being brave. Right, the other one I wanted to talk about was Callum Wilson, and Newcastle aren't renowned for scoring tons of goals, but since Graham Jones came in to support Steve Bruce in that coaching staff, he really did noticeably change the Newcastle's attacking approach. And I think that was the game that I tripled up on Everton. I brought in James Rodriguez and Calvert-Lewin for the first time in the season, and they got beat by Newcastle 2-0. And I think Callum Wilson scored both goals, or at least assisted the second one. And from then on, Newcastle started looking a bit more like their former selves. And I thought maybe Callum Wilson could be a new man this season if they continue with that trend. What do you think?
I tripled up on Everton on that game as well.
Oh, God. Hope you didn't follow me with that.
Now, if I were to ask you a question give me a guess. In the last 15 games of the season, how many did he miss?
Quite a lot. He's one of those strikers that doesn't really get much of the ball. He just likes to finish. So
No, I mean miss as in didn't play.
Oh, didn't play.
The last 15 games of the season, how many games did he not play because he was injured?
Oh, it's a really tough one. I can't remember for the life of me. I would have guessed that he played them all.
10.
He missed 10 out of the last 15 games.
10 of the last 15 games, including the last 3 games of the season, due to injury.
Was I even watching football? I swear I was watching football. Crikey. Yep. That's outrageous.
Last 15 games.
That probably says it all. Enough about Callum Wilson.
and like I said, the last 3 games of the season, he didn't play. So you're looking at a player who has had a prolonged, absence.
And we're talking about Antonio's hamstring, but Callum Wilson definitely is injury prone.
Exactly.
Like Danny Ings. We could talk about Danny Ings, but 8 million probably is a little bit overpriced for me.
And off the field, like last season, he did 12 goals and 4 assists, which is not bad. It's solid. As I said, the budget area seemed to be around 10. If you get more than 10 from your budget striker, that's not too bad. But it's off the field. I believe that his contract's up next season and he's not signing. He's refused. And even is it Hudenhassel? Can never say his name. But he said it's not ideal as well. Is he 28? Danny Ings, 28, 29?
You're testing me now.
He's getting to the prime, and he said, no, this is it. So Southampton have got the decision of, do we keep him for this season, or are we going to have to cash on him as soon as possible? So for me, last season, again, he was back to having quite a few injuries, but it's this off the field issue with club tension as well with the management that puts me off a little bit starting there as well. And Southampton in the first 8 games are second bottom on the fixture ticker. So again, not
great.
one that's
not encouraging. So yeah, that probably says it all. Do we have any other players to pick? I mean, we could go Chris Wood in Burnley, who ended the season.
No, don't say it. Don't say it now, because I said to you, when I was doing my research and looking into football, I said to you, I have the sexiest pick, and you wouldn't believe it. It's Chris Wood.
I mean, that's the first time anyone's called Chris Wood a sexy pick.
Honestly, it's ridiculous. So early when I said about Antonio, his season totals were like 111, 118, and 111. I think that's what he did for those 3 seasons. Yeah, 118, 111, 118. Chris Wood, 131, 136, 138. And last season was 138. Last 10 game weeks, his stats: 2nd for penalty area touches, 4th for assists, 2nd for goals. He got 7 in the last 10. 3rd for goal attempts, 4th for shots in the box, 3rd for big chances, 3rd for headed attempts, 3rd for shots on target.
It was an absolute transformation. I actually can't believe he has those numbers. But if you do look at the XG tracker for Burnley, it is just so low all the way through the season, and then for some reason they become Barcelona from like. Yeah.
They were incredible. Some of the games towards the end of the season, they were like a flower blossoming. Just never expected that at Turf Moor, did you? But honestly, and also last season was his 4th season in a row that he's got double-digit goals. So again, if you're looking for consistency, and Burnley are just so consistent. It's like the same manager since they were founded in like 1888, right? I'm pretty sure Sean Dyche has been there the whole time. They don't lose a lot of players. They don't sign a lot of players. So it's probably going to be, maybe they might lose Tarkowski, the centre-back. He could be on his way. But in terms of the team dynamics, it just doesn't really change, does it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. They are completely a stable club.
But if I just told you those stats earlier, 138 points for a 7 million forward, and he's 2nd or 3rd for sort of key stats you're looking at for a forward. It's
he's 7 million.
7 million.
Oh, God.
Chris Wood is 7 million now. And they start the season against Brighton at home.
Yeah, but then everything after that looks really, really shaky.
It's not ideal. Okay, Liverpool away, a little difficult. But then Leeds at home. I always say, for me, Leeds are the most difficult team to predict because they'll go out there, they'll either win 3-0 or they'll lose 3-0 or draw 0-0. Right? I can't predict. So Leeds, we don't know what's going to happen there. Everton away. Everton last season were horrific at home. I know I've tripled up on them, but we'll talk about that later. And then Arsenal after that. Arsenal, mid-table side.
But they're bringing in Ben White, who's going to surely shore up the defence. You're going to be labelled as Mr. Differential from now on.
I'm definitely not. Actually, no, that's not true. With the tactics I have with no Bruno Fernandes, if I'm not going to captain him and stuff. But yeah, well, this is why last season was very difficult for me. It's kind of like don't do what I do, but do what I say kind of thing.
Well, I think we'll leave it there, mate. It's been great chatting to you, and I think we've been through every possible option. Well, maybe not, but most of the options, I'd say. And if you put Chris Wood in your side, you're an absolute crazy man. But it's been great chatting to you, and we will catch up soon. So we'll leave it there. Yep. Goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.